Okay, hi everyone. This is Winnie, and I'm here with my co-presenter, Haley.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, so we wanted to, before we get started at all, figure out who's in the room, who's faculty. So we have a lot of librarians. I posted a Menti link, and you can go straight there and submit your answer. Okay, so we'll give everyone a minute to do that.
Lots of librarians already.
Yeah, wow.
And some other students. That's great.
Yeah. We've got some nonprofits, some administrators. That's awesome. Okay. Maha said either this conference has loads of librarians or they answer Mentimeter better than others. Okay, wow. Okay, so we have a good mix of faculty and librarians and some students. Okay, so for those of us who are just joining us, I'm going to post the Menti link again. You can go ahead and respond quickly of who's here. Help us understand who we're speaking to today and what we need to prioritize. Okay, give everyone one more minute, and then we're going to go ahead and start with introductions as well as our beginning session. Okay. Wow, 10 students. Awesome. Love to see more students. Okay, so we have so far 39 librarians, 17 faculty members, 5 instructional designers, 10 students, 11 students, 2 administrators, and 2 individuals that are from the nonprofit space and 1 practitioner. So that is awesome. Okay, so please keep filling it out if you would like. We would love to get a full grasp of who we're speaking to today. Okay, so this is our presentation. I've also posted the link in the Sketch as well as here again in the chat. You can access this presentation with us and read along. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm Winnie. I'm the current Open Education Ambassador at Spark, and I served in my former role as the Executive Director of Momentum, which is an education nonprofit focused on serving underserved students and making sure that they have access to post-secondary education and employment. And then prior to that, I was the student body president at the University of Houston, where open education program, implementing an open education program was one of 3 priorities for me as the student body president.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Babb. I am also working for Spark right now. I'm an open education coordinator, and I've been here for about 2 years. I was brought on right after I finished my schooling, actually. So I was vice president academic at the University of Lethbridge Students Union, which is a smaller town about a little bit south of Calgary, Alberta, if you're familiar at all with Canada. So I did that role for a year, and that's where I was sort of first introduced to the notion of open ed. And then I carried that into my second term with the Students Union as president after that.
Great.
So we have a couple quick facts just to sort of set the tone for what we're going to be chatting about today. The first one, I'm sure many of us who are here are already understanding of this, but the average cost of college textbooks has actually risen 4 times faster than the rate of inflation over the past 10 years. That's astronomical. I know for Canadians out there, we don't necessarily have a similar stat that I'm aware of, but we do see that it's the rate of inflation is about on par with this American statistic.
Okay, and fact number 2 is that 63% of students have skipped buying or renting a textbook, yet 90% of those same students worried that foregoing those materials would negatively impact their grade. That was based on a US PIRG survey done last year. And the third fact, the College Board reports that between course materials and textbooks, students can expect to spend at least $1,200 in 2017 to 2018 and between $1,200 to $1,400 for the 2018 to 2019 academic year. That is at least. Okay, So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my story first, basically giving you the open education advocacy in the lens of a student leader. So the survey results, so we started with a survey. When I was running for student government, we had a survey that went out, a small survey first, to understand what exactly we're going to advocate and campaign for out of the seven large issues we were able to get out. We needed to narrow that down to 3. And talking to hundreds of students, I learned that textbook costs at that time needed to be one of the top priorities, textbook affordability. It was something that students were struggling with. I come from an institution where 50% of our students are on Pell Grants or federal aid. And so I recognize that was the first thing that I need to do when I get into office. So after I got elected, I created a survey that would help us understand what the student body costs of textbooks are. And we sent it out to the student body. They responded and let us know a few statistics. So we learned that at our campus, 60% of the students who responded said that their most expensive book was above $200, some capping it at $400, some at $500. There were 40% of students that responded that the textbook alone has caused them to take fewer classes, not register for a class they wanted to take, and or earned a poor grade. And the biggest takeaway for me was that out of all of those students, 78% responded that they have never had a conversation with a faculty member about textbook affordability. Okay, so it was a problem, but no one's had this conversation with faculty members. So then I set out to build a pilot program, right? I was searching for what is the answer to the textbook affordability problem, and learned about open education along the way. A bunch of other student leaders that introduced me to this concept. So I met with the provost in our monthly meeting, and I showed the provost these survey results, and I showed the provost what other institutions were doing along with that. And we built out a pilot program for that year, led by the Dean of Libraries, and a provost budget of $20,000 for 20 faculty members in the fall that are core courses to start their open materials in their course classes. So there was an $1,000 incentive in that pilot program. Part of that pilot program was building out what this was going to look like, getting faculty buy-in, and that required a lot of work and a lot of meetings. And so through that process, I understood and navigated what the faculty concerns and issues were with open education, and we walked through what the student perspective was as to why this program was so essential to get faculty buy-in. Okay, so here are some things overall that I learned. Number 1, student voice has leverage and power. So, oftentimes what faculty and administrators cannot say, students can. They're the end consumer of open education and textbooks, and they're also the main, service or main person that institutions are catering towards, right? Students have the power to say, I don't like something and I want this to change. Second is it's critical for faculty to hear from students and for faculty to be proactive about textbook affordability. Okay, so we were in that session with 6 or 7 professors that we invited to the table, all core courses, just to hear out, okay, what are your concerns? And a lot of the faculty members said, well, I have negotiated really hard with the bookstore, and what we ended up getting was $80 a book, which we really brought that down, and I'm really proud of it. And then, there was like, why is $80 not affordable? What else can we do? And so that was a really big moment during that meeting, because as the only student representative in the room, I went around the room and I asked how much each person's textbook was as a core course, and all of them had negotiated down to $80 or so. So I did a example, right? I said, I'm a freshman student. I'm coming in. I'm taking your 5 classes. I'm paying $80 here, $80 here, $80 here. And if I take 5 courses, like any freshman usually does, I'm paying $400 for textbooks this year alone, this semester. And so you literally saw bells ringing in the room at that moment, like, oh, okay, now we get it. All right, now we're on the same perspective. So students need to be able to speak up about these things, but also we want faculty members to be more proactive about textbook affordability. Faculty also was sent a survey, and we know that a few of them actually didn't know what the cost of their textbook was because the publisher would send a new version. So there was a few things that there was a few gaps in textbook affordability. And then knowing your audience is key, right? Figuring out what open means for them. As a student, going to an administrator and going, I want free textbooks is not going to be incentive enough for an administrator to say, okay, sure, right? Or I want open education, or I want the textbooks to look like me and serve me directly, right? So knowing what they care about, knowing what your audience is going to want, and figuring out what open means for them in their role is key. Fourth is that data is important when speaking to administrators. So if you go and you pitch a project and say, this is what I want, administrators are looking for two things that are really important. Data that is specific to the institution. So that survey I was talking about is really important. And then data of what other institutions have done, right? They want to see models that this actually works. And then on top of that, then you can bring in national statistics. From what I've seen on my campus, bringing national statistics and saying this is just a national problem creates an opportunity for an administrator to say, well, it's not happening here, but data that says and is responded by students, 700, 800, 4,000 students, that's not deniable data. So you can go and start the conversation then. And then the last point is that change happens fast when the right pressure is applied. Okay, so students have the ability to go to their local student journal or go to local news outlets if they want the power to change something and something's just not happening or something's moving way too slow. Change happens really fast. And I've seen this in other initiatives as well when the right pressure is applied. So yeah, so those are the 5 things that I've learned, and then I'll take it over to Haley.
Sure, thank you so much, Winnie. It makes me so happy to hear a little bit about Winnie's story because we work together every day, and yeah, it's just, I think a lot of people in some ways, Winnie made a really good point about, you know, when you present a national statistic, people can kind of say, oh, well, that doesn't happen here, that doesn't happen to our students. But there's also, I think, some like a form of apathy that happens where people just sort of recognize what I like to call the broke student trope, and they say, well, this is a problem, it's always going to be a problem. And so I'm glad you brought up, you know, making stats real to your campus. I think another aspect of sort of the student experience as well is that no one student experience is alike. And especially, you know, between Winnie and I was a student government leader in Canada. Winnie was in the US, and I've noticed a lot of differences, you know, between the experience that we've both had. So just to talk a little bit, I guess, about my background, I was elected to my first role with my students union in 2016. So a few years ago now. I'm a little bit out of the game, and things have certainly changed a lot since then. But in Canada, our student unions or student associations function independently of our university. So there's actually, at least in Alberta, where I come from, there's written legislation that says that they are a completely separate entity from the university or for the institution. And so they do have, you know, like a very strong leverage or lobbying power, not only with their institution themselves, but also at a provincial and a federal level. So in my first role, vice president academic, my focus was more internal. But in the province of Alberta, where I'm from, my institution was part of a larger consortium of 4 other schools, so 5 in total, called the Council of Alberta University Students. And we would meet semi-regularly throughout the year. And it was actually another vice president academic at the time who really wanted to introduce a textbook broke campaign. And I had never heard of textbook broke. I didn't know what an OER was, but I thought, okay, cool. You know, if we're lowering the cost of textbooks, I'm in. And that campaign was really my first foray into this world and an opportunity for me to learn so much. And I still feel like I'm learning and shifting out of the student perspective and into more of a professional perspective, which is a strange place to be, but a very rewarding place to be as well. So that first year we ran our campaign, and similar to Winnie, we gathered some data from students. So we have a relatively well, I guess relative is relative, but my campus was about 8,000 students. And we talked to several hundred students, but we had about 52 of them actually give us consent to collect their data. And that worked out to be only about, I think, like 1.5% of the student population. But we saw astronomical numbers, even in that tiny percent of what the cost of textbooks were. And they were in line with a greater stat that came out of the University of Alberta a few years ago that said that students can expect to pay about $7,000 Canadian over the course of their 4-year degree in books alone. So just astronomical numbers. And that was really instrumental in bringing it forward to the institution and saying, hey, this is a problem here. This is exactly how it's impacting our students. And that, again, similar to Winnie, was a really good wake up call for them to say, oh, you know, this is a big deal. And simultaneously, actually, another department at our institution was running a survey of student poverty in my city, Lethbridge, Alberta. There were 2 institutions, the college and the university. And so there was some crazy stats that came out of that, including like credit card debt for students, you know, ratios of student who were like unable to pay loans, and making it, you know, we've said it over and over again, but just painting the picture for your community is so powerful. So going into my second year with the Students Union, I reran again that year for president and facing a much more external role. We took on a lot more sort of lobbying responsibility. So as part of that role, we would frequently, you know, approach what we call in Alberta members of our legislative assembly, who are provincial representatives, as well as our MPs, member of parliament, who are part of our federal government here in Canada. So we would do advocacy weeks, both at our provincial legislature and on Parliament Hill here in Canada, which were fantastic. But because we had, you know, those sort of provincial and federal membership-based organizations of other student unions, we had a lot of infrastructure to be able to do that. And I recognize that it's not a privilege that a lot of student organizations have access to. It's certainly, you know, for larger schools who do have the access to resources to be able to be part of that. But that coordinated advocacy made a huge difference for us. The year that I was president, we advocated at Parliament Hill for the expansion of a sub-grant to what's called in Canada the Tri-Agencies Grant that does federal research funding, asking them to designate it to OER specifically. And while the ask wasn't directly met, it's certainly been at the top of minds of our elected officials for a while. And there's been some great news coming out of Canada recently and some great policies related to that. And I'm excited to see, you know, each year with the longevity of that student movement going back to Parliament Hill year after year, we're really hopeful to see some big movement on that file. So anyway, I'm probably over my allotted time a little bit, but that's just some sort of my background and where I come from. Afterwards, I've done a little bit of work sort of like going around to other student unions and other student organizations and talking about, you know, what we did, how they can do it too. And now, you know, we want to talk to sort of non-student roles. And I know there's students here and that's fantastic. And we definitely want you to be part of the discussion afterwards. But just about how to engage students in general. And it's such a hard topic because, again, everything is so different campus to campus. And there's no one hard, fast rule for maintaining a relationship with a student entity, whether it be your student government, whether it be a club, whatever it is. It's a very complex relationship to have. Students are very busy. There's a lot of turnover, and it's hard to get their attention for more than, you know, enough time. And so what I always say is that I truly, like, to my core, believe that students are absolutely not apathetic about this issue. That's certainly not the problem. It's a matter of time, resources, and simply being able to navigate the bureaucracy. So I've kind of broken the advice that I give up into 3 steps here. So number 1 is establishing your relationships with the students that you need to, you know, identify as you know, important people to talk to here. So that, again, is very different from campus to campus, but, you know, what are the avenues that you can go to discover, you know, whether or not there's students already on your campus who are already doing this? Is this a priority at your student government level? Is there a club dedicated to this? You know, have you heard from faculty members who have a student in their class who's really dedicated about this issue? Find, really any students that you can, and bring them together. And then also think about how you're in a position to connect with them meaningfully. So how can you offer them, something in exchange for sort of being on your team, whether it's like, an offer for sort of like an extra credit um, study, or whether it's like if you have the means to be able to give them like a paid position at the library to do some research on this. What is the trade-off, and how can we incentivize them to help make this a priority? Maintaining momentum throughout turnover is, I think, perhaps the most challenging. And this is what we get asked about all the time, because obviously your student comes in, if they're in an elected student government role, they're there for a year and they're already coming in with a list of priorities that they want to meet. And then so it's, again, very hard to compete for their time. So what we like to say is figure out how you can identify institutional memory for the student movement. If you're at a campus, and again, I'm not sure if it's similar in the US, but here in Canada, some of our student unions do have full-time paid staff. And so if there's a person, in that organization who you can recruit to your team, or at least who's aware of this issue and can be pushing it, to the student council year after year, that's huge. And that's going to ensure that you have a more long-lasting impression with your students. Another way to do this is by solidifying your goals through policy. So I know a very common thing to do in the US is passing resolutions. I don't know the details about exactly what that looks like, but we also, the year that I was in student government, we passed just sort of like a policy statement saying that this was something that we care about, and it's something that we want to continue to advocate for. And while it may, seem sometimes to be sort of frivolous to just have a statement and then not necessarily an action tied to it, you are sort of embedding a piece of historical context within your union, or within your student organization, and it is something that folks can refer back to. So just these little things to kind of, paste this to the wall wherever you can, are just some ways to get you started and really maintaining sustainability there. And then lastly, I know I'm talking for a long time, amplifying impact. How can I bring more students to decision-making tables? How can I get the people who are making decisions at the policy level, at the institutional level, at a legislative level, to hear from students directly? Do you have access to a table where decisions are being made, whether it's your library committee, whether it's an admin advisory committee? Can you bring a student into that space and have them tell their story in a way that you might not be able to? And in tandem to that, how can you help student leaders navigate the bureaucracy? And this isn't just telling them, oh, this committee meets at this time, here's the website where you can access this. It's helping them understand who are the people who care about this and who are the people who are gonna want to hear your issue. Do you know somebody in the library who really cares about this that they should talk about? Do you know that there's an administrator who maybe has a little bit more of an ear for this than the others that you can approach? Helping them navigate the culture of your institution is huge, and especially for undergraduate students and for first generation students who already are probably feeling a little bit lost. And then how can we publicly celebrate champions of open education? So is there a way that you can, I said this, I forget a session earlier, but almost like hold up a big like neon sign to say, hey, I'm here, I care about this issue, and get other people to hold up their signs as well, so you can find each other across the crowd. Is there a way that you can encourage your student government to give a teaching award to somebody who's been using OER? Can you highlight it in the student newspaper? Can you put it in the library communications, whether you have like a newsletter, or whether you have rotating TVs in the library where you can say, hey, we just really wanted to profile this person who's advocating for this issue. Just think of the ways that you can, turn the lights on and help other people find their people, because I think you'd be surprised who your allies are and where you might find them. My year, I was actually very, very lucky to find some great allies in my campus bookstore who were really, really for this issue and wanted to get sort of like on top of the OER situation. And so, it's not always you're going to be finding allies where you expect them. So these are just some great ways to show yourself.
Okay. Well, so now we're entering kind of the more interactive plan. One of the learning outcomes for this session was for you to walk away with a plan in hand of how you're going to implement and mobilize and reach out to students when you get to your campus, and for students, how you're going to mobilize other students, find your community. So we've created 5 common questions that Haley and I hear a lot at conferences when we present about the student topic, and we'll go ahead and answer those in the breakout rooms. Haley and I will each be in one breakout room. You can choose whichever breakout room you want, and we'll go ahead and do that now, Kingsha.
Awesome.
Cool.
Just give me a minute here to figure out technology.
Okay.
Awesome. So I believe that breakout room 1 is going to be Winnie and breakout room 2 is going to be Haley. And if you click participants or something, you should get a little notification to join a breakout room. And for those folks in the room that are not in a breakout room, let me know if you need help getting into one, or because the session has effectively ended for the main group, we're just going to be doing it in the breakout room.